right. Hello, good people. So, finally, that big conversation that you've been waiting for is here. The conversation with Barack. If you like, the conversation with Dr. Barack Maluka. The very first time that we're having this conversation, that you can be rest assured that it's a conversation that is going to be going on and on and on because there's a lot to discuss about Kenya, there's a lot to discuss about Africa, and there's so much more to discuss about what the world has in store. So karibu sana, and I'm looking forward to a great engagement as we also welcome you to be part and parcel of it. Daktari.
Thank you very much, Linda.
How are you?
I'm very fine. Happy to begin this conversation.
Right.
And as you say, with the break, it's infinite. And it's not just about what the world has in store.
Right.
It's also what the world has had.
That's true.
So to be able to tell what is in store, where you're going,
History.
you must also know where you are, how you got there,
Right.
therefore where you have come from.
Right.
Eventually, it's a mosaic of all this unlimited time and unlimited space.
All right. Speaking of that, we go to some bit of history, and not history as such. I am just looking at my socials, which is pretty much where we focus, nowadays. And so many Kenyans and so many Africans are talking about Ngugi wa Thiong'o. May his soul rest in eternal peace. I'll perhaps just pick one you know, I'll call it response or perhaps one, a post that somebody, put up. It's quite a long one. I'll not go into the details of it, but just a bit of it. And I'd want to hear or pick your brain on what you make of what this gentleman feels, which is actually what most people feel. Oh, sorry, I think this one is a Luya. Omufulu Buhani says this. The late Prof. Ngugi wa Thiong'o is a disappointment to Africa. I know you're asking why. Ngugi wa Thiong'o's decision regarding the disposition of his body cremation is a disgrace and disappointment to Africans. Now, the question arises as to why a distinguished scholar and a native son of Africa would choose to be cremated in the United States. In his literary works, Ngugi championed African values and ethos, advocating for Africanism and worldview as reflected in culture and language. I don't think I need to go into the details, the nitty gritty details. He's captured everything, talked about the Kikuyos, the Luyas, the Luos, and so many other Kenyans sort of feel like Ngugi would have been brought back home for a decent burial, a typical African burial. What do you make of this?
It's the great irony of history that this country would want to appreciate and celebrate one of its greatest sons in death. This country rejected Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I had the privilege of being his publisher or, within the team that published him. We published him at Heinemann, later on at East African Educational Publishers. And we went through very traumatic experience publishing Ngugi. Henry Chakava, the late, God rest his soul in eternal peace, wrote a paper specifically in his volume titled Publishing in East Africa, One Man's Perspective. And there is a whole chapter on the implications of publishing Ngugi, which was very traumatic. It was a labor of love. We were traumatized by the state. And there were those who thought that Ngugi went too far. Remember, 1977, I was in high school and I was a student of literature in A level. I was examined on a grain of wheat. And it was that year that Ngugi was detained. And he was detained following the performance of Ngaika Ndenga in Kaniridu. And the play appeared to be critical of the new African state, the Kenyan state in particular. And when he was detained, there were even editorials in the papers that suggested that he had gone too far. Nobody really explained the meaning of going too far. The state was supposed to be something that was sacrosanct, a sacred entity, a tradition we seem to perpetuate in Africa and even in Kenya today.
Mm-hmm.
You have had members of parliament saying things like, don't criticize President Ruto. If you criticize the
Mm-hmm.
president, we can assure you that there's going to be freedom of expression, but there will be no assurance of freedom after expression.
Mm-hmm.
Ngugi was in that docket. If you looked at the current press,
Mm-hmm.
you have seen what are called secret papers between the government of Kenya and the United Kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
between the East African Foreign Office
Yep.
or Foreign Desk in the wider Foreign Office of the United Kingdom. And you have seen that the desire was always to incarcerate
Mm-hmm.
Ngugi. There are those who desired those days that he should come back home
Mm-hmm.
so that he could be detained a second time. There were those who burned effigies
Mm-hmm.
of coffins of Ngugi and coffins of effigies of Ngugi
Mm-hmm.
in the streets of Nairobi.
Right.
And when in 2004, the publishers, brought him to this country, he was accosted in the exclusive residential premises that we had housed him,
Mm-hmm.
believing that they were safe, that he would be beyond any iota of physical violence.
Mm-hmm.
And not only was he attacked and robbed, but his
Right.
spouse was also sexually violated.
Mm-hmm.
And he chooses that he wants to be cremated. That is his choice. When people die or are about to die, and all of us are going to die
Mm-hmm.
someday, they can decide what they would like to be done with their remains.
Wishes of a dying man.
You can decide that your body should be given to some university for purposes of uh, scientific exploration
Mm.
and discovery. You can decide if you're suffering from a certain condition that they use your remains for further pathology
Mm-hmm.
and discovery within those spaces. You can decide that you do not want to give those who have traumatized you the joy of coming to
Mm-hmm.
look at your remains, to come and stare and ogle at your remains. You can decide to go into the mystic space where people can never point at one spot and say, here lies. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a lot of much ado about nothing. Ngugi has left behind us literature.
Right.
He immortalized himself through his works.
Mm-hmm.
And mortality, therefore, cannot touch him.
Mm-hmm.
Let us stay with the works that he left behind us and let us engage
Mm-hmm.
with them because the issues that he addressed are going to defy time and space
Mm-hmm.
ad infinitum.
I am curious to understand whether the Terry you're just staying in the confines of what people say. You must not mock the dead. You must respect the wishes of a dying man or of a dead person, or you feel like genuinely Kenyans should not belabor on the fact that he was cremated, even as we sum it up on this, because then I have had the privilege of hosting you in other platforms and sat down with you to realize that you are amongst a few people who have not been for the idea of cremation. And perhaps it's because maybe in our conversations, there are times when there are certain individuals that opted for cremation. And you said to me that perhaps this is not what you would wish for yourself or for anybody who is close to you. What
Whether
informs the change of tone? Whether you
whether
wish for it?
whether I wish to be cremated
Right.
or not is one matter.
Okay.
Whether someone else
Chooses for that.
chooses to be cremated
Okay.
is another matter. And, Albert Camus,
Mm.
uh, of the school of absurd, reminds us that to rot under clay
Mm-hmm.
and to rot under marble, there's no difference. You rot, you decay. You
Okay.
decay under clay, you decay under marble. And if you choose that you would like to be dispersed in the Indian Ocean as ash, that is up
Up
to
to
you.
you.
Ash
Okay.
returns to ash. The earth returns to earth.
Mm-hmm.
So my choice, and you never know, progressively, I might start transcending into those spaces
Okay.
that there seems to be a rather macabre way in which we treat um, the final moments. First, there are politicians
Mm-hmm.
who like to have the opportunity to go to funerals, and they will make perfunctory remarks about
Mm-hmm.
the departed in the span of half a minute. Then they will hold another 30 minutes talking about politics
Okay.
and turning the whole place topsy-turvy. There are those who look at the funeral as an occasion to go and on a carousal. They want to go and eat and drink and generally make merry, that which we call celebration. Look, we need to, in my view, look afresh at those final moments. I think there's a sense in which we may even want to start sending invitation cards that if we have not invited you, don't come to the church.
Okay.
Don't come, get crashing into people's homes. Leave those final moments
For
for the
family.
family and
Yeah.
close friends. And if family and close friends and relatives are happy with the choice that somebody made, it is made.
Okay.
And it's got nothing to do with
With the person.
criticizing. We are going to remain critical of some of the things that Wadiono said. He in a sense, has floated ideas. He has framed the questions on language, on culture,
Mm-hmm.
on neo-colonialism, on imperialism. He's written in his own language because he wants to speak to us, the
Mm.
people he's writing for. And as a Luya speaker from Emmanuel, I will want to question whether he does not exclude me by thinking that he's including his Kikuyu compatriots. We're
Okay.
going to discuss those things uh, fearlessly and without in any way belittling or denigrating Bogiwati Ongo.
Mm.
And if he chose to be cremated, so be it. And many other people are going to be cremated.
Cremated.
Are you going to be cremated yourself? Would you like to be cremated?
Perhaps not so early to dictate what I will love. But I mean, who knows? Just who knows?
You
Who
know,
knows? And like you,
it's never too
early,
early.
I know with this thing, yeah?
A young man I went to high school with had written on the wall in his cubicle, "Death prodigious."
Okay.
That was when I first came across
The
the
word
word
prodigious. Uh-huh.
prodigious. And I went to my dictionary to find out the meaning of prodigious.
Mm.
And it meant prevalence, it meant being everywhere.
Yeah,
So death
it's
is
everywhere.
prodigious.
Mm-hmm.
It is everywhere, all the time, accosting and capturing the old, the
Mm-hmm.
young,
Mm-hmm.
uh, with the like probability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, my family is well aware of what would be My wish as at now. All right.
You know,
So,
the angel of death
oh,
is
let
walking
them
all
not
over.
visit today. At
The
least let
angel
them
of
not
death
visit
is
today.
walking all over the place
Let them pass
with his
over.
gunny bags.
Please pass over, angel of death, to the next door.
That is always our prayer. But as
Must
they
always.
say, uh, being born is probability.
Hmm.
It's never assured. It's probable.
Yeah,
But dying once you're born
the sure thing.
is assured. It's
You've even heard Brayo saying
definitive.
that.
It's definitive.
Right, I agree. But like I said, angel of death, please pass over
But which should never worry us
at
because
all. I agree.
you blink for us as Christian
Mhm.
ladies and gentlemen. We believe in the resurrection,
I
where
I agree.
Christ has told us that I am the resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
We believe in the resurrection, and we believe that the process or
Mm-hmm.
the moment of transition is a split second.
Mm-hmm.
You blink your eyes shut in this life,
I agree.
and you unblink them within the same second
Right.
in the resurrection.
Well, there you go. May Ngugi's soul rest in eternal peace. I want the same conversation as to transition us to the next thing that I would love for us to talk about. I know you have touched on Albert Camus. I am excited to speak a bit about R.I.P. Van Winkles, but not just now. Activism, because then, upon that announcement that, Ngugi has left us, many, had to perhaps just go back to their, shelves to pick some of his books, maybe read. Some of you who had the privilege of walking with the history of the numerous copies that he's written will agree with me that there's been what has been considered as a lot of activism in his writings comes at a time when we also are talking hugely about activism and the transition and perhaps the trajectory that it is taking, not just in the country, but across the continent, maybe across the East African community. What would you make of this talk of activism? And slowly by slowly, we will, perhaps build it even as we talk about the element of revolutions and above everything, regime change.
You know, Linda, activism is everywhere.
Hmm.
In fact, activism is the active ingredient in life.
Okay.
That our activism begins at the moment and place of birth.
Okay.
The first thing we do when we are born is to act. And we act by letting out a loud sound
Right. We
that tells
cry.
the world that I have arrived. Yet another activist is born. And if you do not act, they hold you the way they held Boniface Mwangi,
In his activism
Agatha,
activities. It's not
Agatha
funny at all, yeah.
Atahire. They hold you with your legs up,
And they
your
beat,
face facing down, and they
slap you a bit.
slap you in the back
Yeah.
loudly because they want you to act and you announce your presence.
Right.
If you do not announce your presence at that moment, you blew up and they send you back. They
Hmm.
return you to the sender. So from that moment up to the very end,
Hmm.
from cradle to grave, it's about activism. And there's even being active by default in the sense that there are people who claim to be apolitical, that they are not interested, that they leave politics to politicians. There is activism
Hmm.
everywhere. When you go to the restaurant and you don't like what they have placed before you, in other words, there's resistance,
Hmm.
there is dissent, and there are different levels and guises of activism, of dissent, of resistance.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have got violent resistance, where people will pick up arms, they will go out and resist violently. There is verbalized resistance, where people will agitate and speak against certain things and agitate for something that they would like, the order that they would like, condemning that which they do not like. It is activism.
Mhm.
Some are activists in quiet, private chambers. Some are active today within closed groups
Mm.
on social media. They will condemn what is happening. They will share and forward clips and messages that they have seen. This conversation that we are having now will go beyond some of the intended channels. There are people who are going to be forwarding to each other. It is some kind of activism. And there is also intellectual activism. And Ngugi wa Thiong'o was an intellectual activist. He floated ideas. He campaigned against certain things.
Mhm.
He campaigned for certain things. He campaigned for our languages.
Yeah.
He campaigned for our culture. He campaigned for our histories and memory of the African reality, the
Mhm.
African cosmology. And to that extent, you could say that he was perpetually an activist. And I know that the government of Kenya,
Mhm.
in its residual succession, was always worried and hostile, as we said at the start. And the Moi regime, they were always trying to even have him to be thrown out of the United Kingdom that had become his refuge. They
Mm.
were trying to get him to come back so that they could detain him. When President Moi released him from detention on the 12th of December 1978,
Mhm.
it was uh, regaining of freedom of a curious nature,
Mm.
because when they took him away, he was a teacher
Okay.
at the University of Nairobi, but they would not reinstate him
Mhm.
in his job. Look at some of the people who are detained within that general period,
Mm.
the last years of the Jomo Kenyatta regime. There are people like Jean Marie Seronen.
Mm.
Um, he came out in 1978, on the same day. He attempted to go back to parliament in 1979, but the election in Tinderet was rigged
Mm.
against him. There was George Anyona, who was detained in that same period. He went back to Kitutu East, and he got back into uh, politics and into parliament eventually. Of course, 1979, they did not allow him. I remember the headline that read XKPU Nganyona
Mm.
bad, and he had to second Abuya,
All right.
who then became MP for Kitutu East. But he got back at least in the parliament, formed a political party with the restoration of political pluralism, attempted even to become president. Martin Shikuku was re-elected in 1979, and President Moi appointed him an assistant minister in his office of the president. Of course, when Shikuku got there, he didn't like the way things were happening,
Mhm.
and he was given the sack, but he remained in parliament and remained in politics, and afterwards also attempted to become president. He ran for president, but Ngugi was denied the opportunity to go back to that which he had been doing.
All right.
And there are many other examples.
Examples. And I would say that out of this, perhaps not for the individuals, but for the nation, we have notably seen progress and fruits of such kind of activism. And in my own opinion, then that is the essence of activism in whatever quarter, even though many are considered troubleshooters. The kind of activism that we witness today, perhaps in the country, perhaps within the East African corridors, um, brings a lot of questions to the fore. First of all, we ask ourselves just how genuine are some of these kinds of activism, acknowledging the fact that there are some individuals who are, and we have called ourselves puppets of the West for the longest of time, that would sit down and write a script as to how they want to trigger acts of activism in the different African nations, and they would go ahead to fund this kind of activism. I say this not appreciating what happened with the likes of Boniface Mwangi, but equally pinpointing the fact that there are individuals who felt like these are persons that have been funded by George Soros to create a state of despondence. What do you make of this? And just how genuine can activism be such that then we yield positive fruit out of it?
I think those are reactionary sentiments.
Mm,
And I think it helps to define reactionary because many times when we say reactionary, people conflate, people mistake that expression, that idiom to mean reactive.
hmm.
Reactive and reactionary are very
Different.
different.
Hmm.
To be reactive is to react to a situation.
Mm.
To be reactionary is to be hostile to positive change.
Okay.
So the people who say these things are reactionaries. People who find people conflate, people mistake that expression, that idiom to mean reactive.
Hmm.
Reactive and reactionary are very
Different.
different.
Hmm.
To be reactive is to react to a situation. To be reactionary is to be hostile to positive change.
Okay.
So the people who say these things are reactionaries. People who find platforms and opportunities to uh, push certain anti-reformist propagandas and agendas uh, by labeling these people negatively.
Hmm.
It's what you'd say give a dog a bad name and bury him.
Mm.
Before you bury a dog, you would need to you kill a dog, you need to give it a bad name. And those who want to oppress you will first give you a bad name. It's the proverbial hyena that wants to eat its child.
Hmm.
It starts by saying, this
Sounds
child
like a goat.
is smelling like a goat.
Hmm.
And therefore, you can justify the eating. This space that we are privileged to live in for a little while
Mm.
does not belong to any one individual. It does not belong to any one strong opinion. All individuals have a right to be around. All ideas and all opinions have a right to be around.
Mm.
Chinua Achebe says repeatedly, and he has put it stylingly in the novel titled Ant Hills of the Savannah
Mhm.
Grasslands, that where one thing stands, another thing can stand there besides it. Where one idea stands, another idea can stand there besides it.
Mhm.
You may not buy into that thinking. You may not buy into that idea. You are allowed to criticize it. And those who embrace it are allowed to embrace it. And if they find like minded friends, even from offshore,
Mm.
who are willing to help them materially and in other ways to push their agenda,
Mhm.
I think it is wrong for us to give them names, bad names, and attempt to bury them.
Mm.
Why does it become um, a kibaraka? Why do you become a puppet
Mm.
of some country when you are funded and it is not possible that you are perceived as a puppet also when you are receiving a lot of aid? A lot of these African countries, largely out of corruption and mismanagement of their affairs, can also be called puppet regimes
Mm.
because they are on the puppet strings of powers from the West.
Okay.
So when the West makes a nation a puppet regime and somebody from inside Africa also gets support from elsewhere
Mm-hmm.
to resist the puppet regime, one is deemed to be a puppet and
Perfect.
the other one is not. Look at what is happening in West Africa, where you have Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali
Mm.
resisting French puppeteering. And because they have found new friends
Mm.
elsewhere, in Russia and elsewhere, they are being called puppets. But the French regime that has been there has also been a
Making the
puppeteer.
yeah.
And the American commander called Michael Langley starts saying this regime should be removed because it is a puppet. In other words, he thinks that it's fine for American puppeteers
Mm.
to be in charge and not any other puppeteers. So
Mm.
these things are double-edged
Mm.
swords. They cut
Okay.
both ways. If, for example, I do not believe in this LGBTQ thing. In fact, I'm only offended that sometimes they want to rub it
Mm.
into our face. But they have every right to do it
Mm-hmm.
their their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. And that brings me to let's throw in a bit of Swahili where they say amani haiji la kwa njia ya upanga. And indeed, some of these individuals who would be labeled activists have literally faced the upanga. And now that we talk about Tanzania, the president reminds her people that we cannot allow for them to come in and destabilize us because then wamevuruga kwao, wameharibu kwao,
Umethibitiwa.
you know. And I'm assuming that she is saying this perhaps relating it to the recent Gen Z protests. We're days shy to the I want to say do
The
you want to
first
call it yes
anniversary.
anniversary? Do you want to call them celebrations? I do not know. It depends on how you view it. And when she highlights this, then it brings us to that point of just getting to understand: are we that bad as a nation? Have we vuruga to that maximum? Na juu ya vurugu hizi, have we gotten any value out of it? Or this is value that we're going to see in years to come? Because it would be sad for us to be talking
We
about losing lives, abductions of young, people, and yet we do not have anything to celebrate, I'll say it.
Kenya is light years ahead of Tanzania.
They say they have nothing to learn from us.
Oh, they have a lot to learn from us. The ignorant believe that they have nothing to learn from the enlightened,
Mm.
which is that situation where we read in the Gospel of John that in the beginning there was the Word,
Mm-hmm.
and the Word was with God, and the Word was
Was
God,
God. Yeah.
and the Word became light. They say, without him, nothing was
Nothing
made
was
that
made,
was
yes.
made.
Mm-hmm.
The Word became light. And when you read in John 1 John 1, they say, and the Word became light and dwelt among men. But men did not like the light
Mm-hmm.
because they loved darkness.
Darkness, where they could do their
Tanzania,
things.
Tanzania loves darkness.
Is it?
Successive regimes in CCM have embraced darkness Tanzanians live in the darkness of oppression where they cannot express themselves. Kenyans have fought for that space.
Mm-hmm.
Na wale wamethibitiwa Kenya ni wale mabaradhuli wa uongozi, wao ndio wamethibitiwa na Wakenya wamewadhibiti.
Mm.
Acha nizungumze kwa Kiswahili kwa sababu nikizungumza kwa Kiingereza
Hawatasikia ndugu
Samia
zetu.
Suluhu hataelewa
Hapana bwana.
ninasema nini,
Haya.
kwa sababu sisi tumepanua uhuru wetu,
Mm.
tunajieleza, tunamweleza rais yale ambayo yanatupendeza na yasiyotupendeza, pia tunamweleza, tunaeleza serikali na tuna huo uhuru, na huo uhuru haujakuja kwa lelemaa, umekuja kwa kujitolea,
Mm.
umekuja kupitia kwa huo wanaharakati ambao anaukashifu na kushtumu,
Mm.
na majenzi nao pia waelewe kwamba sio wao ndio wameanzisha hii mikakati. Wakati mwingine nimewasoma na kuwaona hasa katika mitandao, nao pia wakijipiga vifua
Kiburi
wakisema
kidogo.
kwamba sisi sio kama baba
Wazee.
zetu
Mm-hmm.
na babu zetu. Huu uhuru wanaoutumia kuyasema hayo, hata wakati ambapo uongozi ibuka unajaribu kurudisha gurudumu la ukombozi mahali ambapo lilitoka,
Mm-hmm.
ni uhuru ambao umeletwa na vizazi vyetu. Tumeweza kuteswa katika hii mitaa, kufungiwa vyuo vikuu, wengine wameweza kukamatwa na kuwekwa kizuizini, wengine wameweza kuharibiwa sehemu zao nyeti na serikali ambazo zilikuwepo kwa hayo mapambano. Kwa hivyo wao wajue kwamba ni vijiti tu ambavyo wamepokezwa kutoka kwa vizazi ambavyo vilitangulia, na wakati mwingi wanapozungumza wanazungumza kama watu wanaozungumzia
Mm-hmm.
mapengo katika kule kuelewa kwa historia ya nchi yao. So we have expanded that space
All right.
from the reversals and negations that started in 1964, 65 with the
Mm-hmm.
tampering with the constitution by the party that was in power, the making of the country a de facto one state and a political entity, and afterwards a de jure one party state in 1982,
Mm-hmm.
to the extent that in 1991 we restored multi-party democracy and went to the first election under that reversal or restoration in 1992,
Right.
and kept pushing up to 2010 when we gave ourselves what was hailed and continues to be hailed
Mm-hmm.
as the most progressive constitution anywhere in the world.
Right.
So when we ventilate, when we cogitate, it is in celebration of our freedom,
Okay.
that our independence begins meaning something, that we can reject the finance, go and reject the finance bill in Tanzania and see what they will do
Good
to
to
you.
you.
Go and tell,
Which actually happens the same time of the year
yes,
across,
yes,
yes.
tell President
Samia's.
Samia Suluhu that you have dialed the wrong number and see what will happen. And you have seen that when people are being tortured, they're being told very, very, very cynically to say, Asante,
Mm-hmm.
Asante, Rais Samia, Asante. Oh my God, that is something that
Could it be because they're happy and maybe they're seeing developments and they're seeing what their presidents are doing? Because we have said this, that we constantly do not even need to have a proper communication, docket for, the developments that are evident to be articulated or to be said. That, development, even in the darkest of corner, will shout for itself. Perhaps there's a lot of progress in terms of
they are
growth of the nation.
caged. They are caged.
But
They are completely caged. Ask Maya Angelou why the caged bird sings, and I think we talk about that
and I'm looking forward to have you some more because then we have about 6 minutes to close
the
this one, and
next
we've not
time.
even talked about
Why
Kenya.
the caged bird sings, we will talk about that. but these are people ambao wamethibitiwa.
Mm.
CCM imewathibiti.
Mm.
Ndimi zao haziwezi kuzungumza, hata kukohoa hawezi kukohoa
Mm.
Tanzania. Ndio mgeni anapoingia hapo kuja tu kuhudhuria kikao cha mahakama,
Mhm.
hajafanya kitu chochote cha jinai au nini, wameshamnasa,
Mhm.
wameshamtesa, wameshampiga vijiti na kumtendea vitendo vya uovu na uozo na uvundo. Huwezi kusema kwamba hiyo ni amani. Amani huwa katika nyoyo za watu na
Mhm.
katika mawazo yao, na kujihisi kwamba ni watu wako huru na wanaweza kutoa hoja zao bila kudhulumiwa. Lakini iwapo kila wakati unaogopa na kuchelea na kuwa na wasiwasi kwamba serikali itakutendea maovu, hiyo siyo amani. Na bila shaka Rais Samia Suluhu na wale wanaharakati wake wanaelewa kwamba serikali ya Tanzania iliyopo kwa wakati huu ni serikali ya kiimla, serikali inayotawala kimabavu.
Wajua nilikuwa nimeandaa vitu vingi sana tuzungumzie IEBC, tuzungumzie kaka yule ambaye anasema ana base,
Lakini
tuzungumzie
hivi vikao
Omnyoro.
tutaendelea navyo tu.
Tutaendelea navyo zaidi na zaidi.
Eh,
Kabla hatujafunga, nafikiri labda I am an ardent reader of some of your articles, perhaps the latest. African leaders still living in?
they are living through a
Okay.
revolution and
Mhm.
they are living in the past. They're
RIP Van
living.
Winkle. What do you say about that? Labda hiyo ndio itatufungia kikao
Rip
hiki.
Van Winkle aliandikwa
Mhm.
na Washington Irving ambaye alikuwa mwandishi Marekani
Mm.
aliyeishi katika karne ya 19 nyakati hizo, na alikuwa anaandikia juu ya kuja kwa uhuru
Mm.
wa Amerika, kwani Marekani walikuwa ni koloni ya Uingereza.
Mhm.
Na yazungumzia bwana mmoja ambaye alipewa kinywaji fulani na akalala,
Mhm.
akaingia katika zogo la usingizi, na alilala kwa muda uliozidi miaka 18. Alipoamka akapata kwamba ukoloni uliisha, pale ambapo kulikuwa picha ya mfalme wa Uingereza, kulikuwa na
Ameleta.
picha ya George Washington,
Mm.
waonyesha kwamba ukombozi ulikuwa umeshafika. Na mara nyingi mapinduzi yanapokuwa yameanza, yameendelea, kuna wale ambao hawaelewi na wanajaribu bado kushikilia, kukazia na kumnia vitu vya zamani. Kama hapa Kenya, you cannot continue behaving if you're in State House as if it is the old canon days.
Okay.
Hizo zilikuja na ziliisha,
Zikapita.
na sasa una vizazi vipya, kuna teknolojia mpya, kuna ruwaza mpya, watu wana mitazamo tofauti, hautawafinyilia tena. Hizo siku
Zimepitwa na
zimeisha.
wakati.
Ni kweli kwamba kuna watu watakamatwa, kuna watu watateswa, kuna watu watauawa, lakini hili gurudumu limeshashika kasi,
Mm.
huwezi kulirudisha nyuma tena. Kwa hivyo, ikiwa umebahatika kuwa wewe ni kiongozi au wewe uko karibu na kiongozi, umpe ushauri unaoweza kumsaidia,
Mm.
kumwambia kwamba tufanye tofauti, tujaribu kuwazia tofauti, tujaribu kutenda tofauti.
Mm.
Hivyo wewe umeona akina Boniface Mwangi wameteswa, wamedhulumiwa kule Tanzania. Waziri wa masuala ya nchi za kigeni
Mm. Musalia
Mheshimiwa
Mudavadi.
Musalia Mudavadi,
Ndio.
badala ya kuwauliza Watanzania kwamba mbona mmefanya hivi, na sijui kama amesoma itikadi za
Mhm.
kimataifa na itifaki za uhusiano wa kimataifa. Kitu cha kwanza, jukumu la kwanza ni kuwatetea raia wako
Mhm. Alafu
na
baadaye
kutetea nchi yako,
ndio.
kisha baadaye unaweza kuwasuta. na kuambia na hata nyinyi mlikuwa mmeenda huko kufanya
Mm.
nini, lakini ukimbii mbele na kuanza kuwapigia upato wale ambao wanadhulumu raia wako. Ni kuishi mahali papotovu pa kusahau kwamba nchi imepiga hatua, jumuiya imepiga hatua, ulimwengu umepiga hatua. Tuko katika nyakati mpya, nyakati za mageuzi, mchipuko wa mageuzi ya nne
Ndio.
ya viwanda, na
Mhm.
hutarejesha lile gurudumu pale lilitoka. Ikiwa wajaribu kuota kwamba litakuwa pale, basi wewe ndio Rip Van Winkle,
Mhm.
unalala. You are sleeping in the middle of a
Probably.
revolution, and the winds of revolution will sweep you away. You had better adjust your sails
Mhm.
so that they are in consonance with the changed times. That way, you may even be the one to drive the change
Mm.
so that the change becomes evolutionary
Right.
and not revolutionary.
Fair enough. Doctor,
Thank you.
before we close, it's good to also teach some people, how some of these things are supposed to say. It's proper to say RIP or RIP. I know we.
Rip.
RIP is
That
RIP.
man is a Rip Van Winkle.
This is RIP Van
But
Winkle, eh?
yes,
But
but
generally.
yeah, that was the name that
Mhm.
Washington Irving
Yeah.
gave this character.
Mhm.
And it's remarkable that he drank something before he went
Event.
to sleep. Na
Uh-huh.
hawa viongozi, they drink hallucinations. They drink illusions from the people around them, the small fellows around them,
Mhm.
like the ones who gave Rip Van Winkle what he drank. And so he rested in peace for
For quite some
the
time.
entire period of the revolution.
Revolution.
Mr.
Well,
Mr. R.I.P.
mhm.
Rip Van Winkle.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you so, so much. The conversation with Barack. We're going to have more and more of this
And more and
and
more
more.
and more.
There's so much about Kenya that we are
And the
going
world.
to, and the world. Yes, yes, yes. Asante sana. We're looking forward to that. My name is Linda Lela. And
Thank you.
this is Dr. Barack. Look, you're not going to say your name.
I, I'm shy.
You truly are. Asante sana.